Hello, I'm Elizabeth Rennie, Editor-in-Chief at ASCM, and I am joined today by ASCM's career coach, Rodney Apple. We're talking to Rodney today because as the global crisis continues to unfold, there are literally millions of people around the world who are being affected. They're being challenged to figure out their next steps. Supply chain professionals are being laid off, they're furloughed. There's a lot of people who are in uncharted territory. So Rodney, I knew you could offer numerous strategies to help our watchers demonstrate their value to potential employers, to stay relevant, and to identify the opportunities amid the obstacles. So thank you so much for joining me today.
You're very welcome, Beth, and I'm looking forward to having some dialogue and providing some advice. There's definitely a silver lining here, is that this too shall pass. And while things seem pretty grim, the good news, the silver lining, is that the supply chain is the engine that gets all of the goods and services to and from, and so it's not going to shut down. It's slowing down, obviously, in many areas, but for the most part, it's not going to shut down. And a lot of those jobs, especially if you're out in the operations and supporting those operations, in many industries, those are still thriving, if not even on steroids right now. You think about food and beverage and CPG and any of the industries supporting anything on the grocery shelf right now that's flying off the shelf. Those companies are all working overtime, expanding shifts, expanding capacity through contract manufacturers, anyone that supplies ingredients, packaging, shipping, logistics services. Those folks are the ones that you want to target if you happen to be in another industry that's sort of on the decline. So.
Yep. Well, actually, that was one of my questions, so I'm actually going to jump over to it just since we're talking about that right now. Do you think this is a good time to look into some of those industries, like warehousing and logistics, like you mentioned, some retail, or is this not the right time to shift lanes? What would you say to that?
Well, I think it's a great time. It just depends on which industry you're in. And obviously, if you're unemployed, you want to be very open-minded and be a lot more open to different types of industries and even different types of roles. And in some cases, you may need to even take a step back. And if you can get in with a growing company, you could potentially take 2 steps forward when things start to rebound. But I'm a big fan of always having a contingency plan, a plan B, a plan C in place. Even if you're in one of the industries that's thriving, no one has a crystal ball. We do not know what's going to happen with this pandemic crisis. How long it's going to last. A lot of it comes down to testing and coming up with some kind of a cure, hopefully a vaccine. And so then there could be projected to be a pretty long recession. We don't know how long that could last. So it's always wise to have a contingency plan in place, even if you feel like you're very safe. That means maybe you should start taking some of those calls from us recruiters when we reach out, just so you can establish some connections. And if you're the type that only networks when you're in need of a job, I would recommend that you be open and start conducting more networking, having your profile on LinkedIn up to par so you're more discoverable. I think this applies to, not everyone. Of course, there's plenty of people out there that are very safe in their roles. But if you're not 100% sure, it's always wise to just open those doors, leave them cracked at least, because you just never know what tomorrow may bring.
All right. So if someone is currently employed, contingency plans leave the doors open. I'm assuming if you are not currently employed that you would not recommend a wait and see approach, that you have to be very proactive right now, even though it seems very challenging. So would you agree with that? And what are some steps people should take?
100%. I think the only exception would be if you just happen to have plenty of disposable income that you want to take the time off. And there's also people that need to take the time off to care for kids. You never know what the spouses may be. If you're in healthcare, especially, you're working all kinds of crazy shifts. But otherwise, if you're unemployed, if anything, you want to step on the throttle, because there's definitely not near as many roles that are open, unprecedented number of layoffs, and there's still more to come. So you definitely want to step on the gas. And there's some good news out there, because a lot of people, especially in leadership roles and corporate type positions in supply chain, the vast majority are working from home. Obviously, if you're in an operation, a distribution center, fulfillment center, or a factory, that's your background, then you're going to have to reach out. I would say, depending on your level, but you could be reaching out to the leadership of those operations, plant manager, distribution center manager. And also you want to reach out to the folks at the corporate office that are involved with overseeing those operations, supporting those operations, and so forth.
Right. So another way to make the most of this challenging situation is by focusing on the things that you can control. One of those things is boosting your own skills by investing in professional development. So what kind of strategies would you recommend there?
Great question. We're seeing more and more universities, even some of the more prestigious universities. I know MIT, some of these schools have free online programs that they're offering. So you have some low-cost options. And I know that's always nice if you're unemployed and you're trying to watch every penny going out the door. I'm a huge fan. I do a lot. When I read, you probably see the bookcase behind me. So I've got books that I read. It's a great time to read up on books, and there's a whole lot of supply chain ones out there. I'm writing one myself on the career aspect of supply chain, obviously, and hope to get that out in a few months. But there's a plethora of supply chain blogs that are out there too, and I use a tool called Feedly. It's feedly.com, and it basically is a way to curate content, and you can set up folders and anything that's written that hits the internet, you're going to be able to get it in real time, syncs across all devices. So I think that's a fantastic way. Obviously with ASCM, you have the APEX credentials, and if you haven't had time in your schedule to study and take the courses and the exam, then now is probably a better time than ever to be brushing up and looking at those certifications. Would also take some time. I think the landscape is going to change with many positions. I think there's going to be a lot more work from home positions. This stuff is playing out in real time. So you want to be aware of the types of roles that could be created as a result of this pandemic as well. Pay attention to the industries that are thriving. We've talked about those: food, beverage, CPG. I think anything in healthcare, obviously pharmaceuticals are the big ones. It doesn't mean other industries are going to slow down. They aren't going to come back. It just means that there might be less opportunities in those industries. So now is a perfect time. You've got many universities are going to, if they don't have an online program now, they will in the very near future.
Great. Okay, so earlier you mentioned LinkedIn, your LinkedIn profile. I know traditionally networking has been thought of as more of an in-person event, but obviously that's changed a lot in recent years.
Right.
So what should people be doing right now to make sure their profile is as great as it could be, to keep connections, relationship building, all of that?
Right. I think networking is paramount. If you definitely want to set up the job alerts so you get those. You can automate that process, because I know it can be very frustrating if you're spending hours upon hours surfing the internet and job boards. I feel like Indeed, it's like the Google of job boards. They crawl all the career sites for most companies out there. I bet they capture, I would guess, at least 80, 90%, maybe more of the available postings. And then you have LinkedIn. They have a job section. Many companies, including ours, advertises there. I think between those two, they capture quite a bit. I would recommend having a well thought out and written down job strategy, and then start looking at those companies as they come in, which ones are hiring. As it relates to the networking though, you definitely want to reach out and connect. As we talked about earlier, most people are working from home, and now is probably an easier time to catch them than ever before. And what I've found, I've had a lot of candidates that have been unfortunately laid off, had a number of conversations, and I tell everyone, start with your immediate network. It doesn't have to be your work contacts, but think about people. Could be, if you go to church, you've got those folks. If you've got neighbors, make everybody in your immediate network aware of your situation and what you're looking for. So to start there, that's kind of the step one. And then from there, it's getting referrals from those individuals, but also paying very close attention to the companies that are hiring right now. Obviously, LinkedIn is a very good place to go as it relates to identifying the right people. So think about the decision makers. Clearly, you want to check that box when you apply online, but there is a way, kind of, I call it going through the employer's back door, where a lot of the postings will say this job reports into the VP of supply chain, and you can go right into LinkedIn, look up that individual. And you don't want to try to sell that person on the first message. The goal is to engage. So send a LinkedIn invite. When they accept it, come back in with a short but sweet message. I applied to this posting, and have some value statements, what you've delivered, what you bring to the table, and see if you could get some kind of an introduction. Obviously, you can't do a coffee meeting or anything like that anymore. So, setting up a Zoom call or using an online tool like we're doing right now, I think is favorable and preferable to a phone call. It's nice to be able to see people and engage with them. There's going to be a lot more of that going forward, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those are the best practices. And don't give up on the first time. A lot of people say, well, I reached out to 20 people, never heard back. People are still busy.
Yeah.
If you don't get them on LinkedIn, then you may want to try, shooting an email over, and then put a tickler or reminder in your calendar to follow back up after a few days. You don't want to be a stalker, though. You don't want to hammer someone's phone 20 times a day, but just use wise judgment. Be persistent, and eventually you can get through. So you got the hiring manager, but I'll think about other people that you could connect with inside the company that could help you. Could be someone that supports a supply chain from an HR perspective. Obviously, there's typically internal recruiters in most mid-sized to large companies that you can reach out to, and sometimes even the folks that run the department, or even the supply chain, depends on what level you're at. So don't think that you just have to reach out to one person. Try multiple people. I would even recommend reaching out if you find folks that are doing the work that you're doing now. Reach out, just have more of a conversation. Say, I'd love to get into a job like yours. What did you do to get into that position? And see if you can get some advice from their perspective.
All right. So for those who don't know, Rodney is also the author of the Professional Development Department in SCM Now magazine. And Rodney, one of the things that you've written before is that it's important to have a list of target companies, employers that you would really like to work for.
That's right.
Do your research on those companies. And I was thinking this would also be a great time to kind of watch those companies and see how they treat their employees, see how they're, if they're working toward rebalance and recovery in an ethical manner, things like that. So, what would you recommend there?
That's a great question. And, from my observation, and I even see some of our clients and their CEOs that are putting on weekly videos. We work with a company called Marzetti that makes salad dressings, and I've seen the CEO, Dave Szynski, for the last several weeks, he's had a shot from a factory. He's had a video coming from one of the distribution centers. So he's out there and very visible in the workforce. I know their teams, everybody, especially in a factory or warehouse environment, you're making sure your employees are safe. Those kind of communications, especially from the senior most leader, can go a very long way. And I think it's a good recruiting tool as well when people see like, wow, this guy's a fantastic leader. He's doing everything he can to keep his folks not just safe, but employed. But Glassdoor is a great place. And I would even say, just like we talked about a minute ago, as you're prospecting companies on your target list, I call them exploratory conversations. You don't have to mention that you apply to a job, but sometimes you can just reach out to people that are peers doing the same kind of work. Yeah. And just have some conversations. And a lot of people are, I know when they reach out to me, everybody wants to say, well, what are you seeing out there? What are you hearing? It's the same thing. You can reach out to people and have those types of conversations right now. Everybody wants to talk. I think it helps to get things out in the air, but you can certainly ask them, well, how are things going at your company? I mean, I'm having these conversations all the time right now, and you want to be sympathetic, empathetic, and some people are not pleased with the way they're being treated. They may be vocal about it, during a conversation.
Sure. All right. So for our final question, for people like us who are fortunate enough to still be employed right now, we are learning how to work from home. Whether it's Zoom, Google Meets, Microsoft Teams, there is actually a lot of new technology that people are learning about. But if you are someone who's not as familiar, but does land an interview, which of course will be virtual now, what would you recommend so they can ramp up and make sure that they're comfortable interviewing, digitally?
Right. Well, some of these tools, I mean, many of them have a cost. It's not that expensive. We have a Zoom account here we've been using for the last couple of years. We love it. Zoom is doing very well. So I recommend, all of them are very similar though. And bottom line, you want to make sure that you practice in advance. You want to be dressed to impress. Look for things like bandwidth challenges. If you're over Wi-Fi, I've got a very strong signal here. I'm not worried about being plugged in, but sometimes you may want to plug into your router if to get the maximum speed. Dress, and when you do dress, don't just dress from top to waist. You want to dress all the way down. You just never know if somebody's going to walk in, your kid, and you need to get up, and all of a sudden you're in your boxers. That might be a bit awkward. There's plenty of great advice on video interviewing. As a matter of fact, Beth, we're putting an article together for our next blog, just kind of giving some tips there. So we'll get that out. Might be something that we could share, but there's plenty of other people that have written about this, and you can see our faces, and you want to be level with the camera, so you're looking kind of eye level, and leave a few inches of space up here is recommended. Stare into that light, the camera, so it looks like you're looking right at the individual. If I'm over here looking like this, it's going to look a little bit awkward.
It's difficult to do sometimes.
That's right. It is. And you want to definitely practice, though. You can practice with a friend, family member in advance until you feel comfortable, because it can be a bit challenging to stare into a camera versus like wanting to look around and do this and that. Mm-hmm. And try to have the distractions on pause. I've had my daughter walk in, a little 2-year-old, about to turn 3. Hi, Daddy. And I just pick her up and show her to whoever I'm talking to. Sometimes our team. Usually people get a chuckle out of it. It is the new normal right now, and totally. I don't think people are going to be too offended by it. But if you're on an interview, you want to take it serious. Dress up like you would in an interview. Do you have to have a tie on? Not quite sure about that. I think I would ask before the interview, if you're talking to your recruiter, hey, I'm gonna definitely dress up, but you think it makes sense to have a suit and tie or whatever it might be. But you don't want to have a t-shirt on or anything like that. Just make sure you look your best, and there's no distractions. Turn your phone off. The dog is put somewhere, or a pet if you have one, and then just try to get that quiet time. And obviously you want to make sure you're prepared, have your written list of questions. Most of these tools, I'm not looking at anything today. This is straight from here, but you can minimize your window and maybe have some of the questions you want to ask the interviewer in the background. There's nothing wrong either with having a sheet of paper and referring to it. I don't think anyone's going to frown upon that. It's better to be prepared, have a list of questions than trying to just come off the cusp. So that's my best advice.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, Rodney. Is there anything else that you'd like to offer to people watching today?
Sure. So obviously, if you're watching this, you might be an ASCM member, and wanted to make you aware of some great resources we have that we've put together in partnership with ASCM. Goes back to 2014, so we're 6+ years into this, where I've served as the career coach. Most of those are webinars that you can replay, and then we've got some white papers as well. And like Beth said, you'll find in the past several series of magazine issues under professional development, I've got several articles in there. Where you can find these resources, if you go to apix.org/careercoach, one word, you'll log in with your credentials, and then you'll find a plethora of webinars that you can replay. And we've covered just about everything under the professional development umbrella. If you are, want to brush up on your job search strategy, we've done that one a couple of times. We refreshed it. There's resume advice, how to optimize your LinkedIn profile, networking, offer negotiation, really everything. So I would recommend you check that out. And I'm always available too. If anyone needs any extra advice, feel free to reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn. I've got a unique name, Rodney Apple. Look me up, send me a message. I'll be happy to help.
All right, wonderful. Thank you again, and thanks to everyone who's watching us today. Bye, Rodney.
Thanks. Thank you, Beth.